Noticed over the last few days, the corporate media has depicted the second quarter of 2019 fundraising totals for presidential candidates as if Senator Elizabeth Warren has just reinvented the wheel on small dollar grassroots fundraising. She's just totally changed the game. Wow. You could raise money without doing high dollar caviar, champagne fundraisers? Why didn't anyone do this before? Thank you, Colin Tooley, for the great graphic. So the corporate media has been presenting this, and they've been leaving out some important numbers as well as some important context, particularly about Bernie Sanders. In fairness, Elizabeth Warren did raise $19.1 million in the second quarter. That would be April, May, and June. Deserves credit. That's a really impressive total. Her average donation was $28, so it is small dollar donors donating to her, and not taking anything away from her. However, there's important context, and when you hear the corporate media saying she's got the momentum, Bernie Sanders is fading, not so much. Let's start with Jeff Zeleny of CNN.
Speaking of Sanders, his campaign just released its latest fundraising total, bringing in $18 million in the last 3 months. So what does it all mean? Who better to explain than Iowa's favorite son, except he is not from Iowa? CNN's Jeff Zeleny joining me now. Jeff, so many numbers, so little time. What do you make of it?
Okay, good morning. Let's do some math here. The reality is for Bernie Sanders, that $18 million he raised in the last 3 months, yes, it's a very good number. It's a consistent number to what he raised in the first 3 months of the year. But it's slightly lower, it's $6 million lower than Pete Buttigieg's number that he released yesterday. So it shows that Bernie Sanders is no longer leading the way in terms of fundraising.
Iowa's favorite son, Jeff Zeleny. The takeaway there, Bernie Sanders is no longer leading the way in terms of fundraising. Jeff Zeleny kind of underscored it, maybe minimized it. Didn't really get into details, but kind of important there that Mayor Pete, America's new mayor, he held 50 high-dollar caviar/champagne swigging fundraisers with Wall Street fat cats, financial industry people, Uber executives, you get the point, for the max donation amount. So yeah, if I did 50 high-dollar fundraisers where the majority were paying $2,800 to pop, I probably raised a heck load of cash. Heck, so I don't get demonetized by YouTube. So, yes, Pete Buttigieg raised more money than everybody else. Bernie Sanders raised $18 million. However, what was his average donation amount? And what were the types of people? Who were the types of people he was taking money from? How much money were they leaving per pop? That $2,800. This tells us, is it Wall Street cash? Is it big special interest cash? Primarily, or the people, grassroots. We'll get to that in a bit. But not to be outdone by CNN and Jeff Zeleny, oh boy, the folks at MSNBC, they are gladly jumping on the bandwagon that Elizabeth Warren has totally reinvented the wheel. Reinvented the wheel on small dollar grassroots fundraising. Here we go.
But she's also, her fundraising haul, it's pretty extraordinary. And Steve, it does prove your point, something that you've said throughout this process, that yes, the bundlers are so important, the big money givers are so important, but just as important, these candidates' ability to raise a lot of money actually online. And Elizabeth Warren's numbers, boy, very dramatic because not only did she easily bypass Kamala Harris, but also Bernie Sanders. Who would have believed that several months ago?
Yeah, Joe. Well, first, I think you were exactly right when you talked about the fact that people were paying attention to her on the campaign trail. And she did something that, honestly, I would not necessarily have predicted, which is she went kind of through the policy door. Her mantra was, I have a plan. Her famous refrain has become, I have a plan. She has a plan for everything. We may or may not like it or agree with it. But it seems that the public has bought into that idea that she is someone with ideas who's going to get get things done. And secondly, to your other point about where the money came from, it is a fact that she raised this from individual donors. She's had something like 450,000 unique individual donors in this campaign. And just to put that in a frame of reference, as everyone I think knows, you needed 65,000 donors to get on the debate stage for the first debate. You need 130,000 to get it on the second debate. And so she has massively outperformed those criteria. And another factoid for you, her average donation was about $28. For Mayor Pete and for Biden, the average donation was about $49. And so obviously they were depending more on big money. The only one who was below her was actually Sanders at $18. So he still very much is getting that money from the people. But when you sum this all up, I think what you see now is that within that progressive wing of basically Sanders and Warren, it's clearly Warren who now has the momentum.
Woo! Well, first of all, you know, not really relevant to the discussion of second quarter fundraising, but you gotta love MSNBC, Morning Joe, the people they have on. That guy, Steve Ratner, this is just 2010. As it investigates suspected kickback schemes in New York's pension system, the SEC has been pushing to bar Stephen L. Ratner, a prominent financier and former advisor to the Obama administration on the auto industry, from working in the securities industry for up to 3 years, according to 3 people told of the discussions. But Mr. Ratner has fiercely resisted the proposed penalty, setting up a face-off with the federal government. And of course, he tried to get back into Wall Street years later. The former financier, who in 2010 was barred from the business for 2 years and sought re-entry in 2013, withdrew his long-stalled requests for reinstatement. So maybe another day we'll talk about a little bit more about Steve Ratner, but not exactly an upstanding, citizen. Just another disgraced plutocrat who is promoted in corporate media. That would be Steve Ratner. I digress. So, you know, Morning Joe and the crew over there, who more than anyone helped elect Donald Trump in 2015, let him call in his pajama pants, was like, "Oh, Donald," Mika Brzezinski used to say when he came on. That's the Morning Joe we just played. They had a few doozies. So Elizabeth Warren's numbers, boy, very dramatic, Joe Scarborough said. Mr. Ratner said she's had something like 450,000 unique individual donors in this campaign. 450,000 unique individual donors in this campaign. Remember that number. I'm going to be coming back to that. And the best part was when he says, the only one who is below her is Sanders at $18, average donation of $18. But he still very much is getting that money from the people. But he says from the people, but moves off of that so quickly. When you sum this all up, it's clear Elizabeth Warren has the momentum. We'll get back to that too. So basically, they're depicting a world where Elizabeth Warren has totally reinvented the wheel in terms of small dollar grassroots fundraising. And even though Bernie Sanders is still raising money from the people, it's Elizabeth Warren with the momentum. One more clip for you, if you could stomach one more.
Let me talk about the money first, because I think it is really important. Warren basically set aside the traditional fundraising platform. She's not doing the, hors d'oeuvres circuit behind closed doors. And in the first quarter, she got smoked. She only raised $6 million. She has a ton of overhead. She has a very large staff. She's trying to build a big presidential campaign. And a lot of people were sort of holding their breaths, waiting for the number that came out yesterday. The 19.1 would have been impressive if she had done it the old-fashioned way, and she didn't. She did it this new way, so that was big in and of itself.
Explain what that means. So no bundlers.
This is the sort of the standard no PACs, no corporate donors that all these candidates have agreed to do. But she's also not doing any traditional finance events.
Wow.
So we've seen, like, for example, Biden does these, but he has a pool reporter in the room.
Print pool.
Mayor Pete does a lot of these events. Beto has started to do some. He usually live streams them. All the candidates are trying to open up what has traditionally been a very closed process. She's foregoing it entirely.
Shouldn't do any.
Saying, if you want to send me money, send me a check. Send me money through Act Blue. There's no event. You can't, you can't go to some law office.
You can't buy an audience.
You cannot buy an audience with her. You've got to show up. and earn it. And so now that we've seen this has worked, this is proof of concept for her. And as we've talked about a lot before, so much of this race is strength begetting strength.
Right.
I think a lot of those big bundlers and donors who want to write big checks will start sending her checks now anyway, because now this is proof that what she's doing has at least gotten off the ground a little bit. As for the performative aspect of this, I've covered her a lot at these big cattle call events where you have multiple candidates in a room. She usually comes on last because it's usually alphabetical, and she always really wakes up the room. And I've seen it with a variety of different crowds, whether it's, you know, union trade builders or activists in different groups. This is one of the first of her own events that I have seen, and she's just really sharp. She knows her policy. She has very good comedic timing. The jokes are terribly corny, sort of John McCain style, corny New Hampshire jokes. But the timing is good. I mean, it's sort of an underrated skill in an era of digital everything for campaigning. But she's just good at the performative aspect on the trail. People who came at 4:30 in the afternoon on a Monday got something for showing up.
So her crowds appear to be huge. What's going on in the room? Are there more women than at some of their? I mean, what's the crowd? What's the? You made it funny. You made a comment that I was chuckling about. I mean, it was hard to figure out who a Swalwell voter was. Who's a Warren voter?
It's a lot of women. It's a younger crowd than are the Bernie Sanders and, well, that's not true. It's a younger crowd than are the Biden events that I've covered. It is roughly demographically similar to Bernie crowd. There's a lot of college students, younger people who are interested in her. There's definitely a lot of Bernie pull away. I met a lot of folks who were with Bernie in 2016, and maybe they're still shopping Warren, but they're there to check it out. You know.
Again, I got to do it. Did you see Nicole Wallace, disgraced former George W. Bush communications director, who, of course, now has a show on MSNBC because MSNBC is just a rehab home for warmongers and disgraced Iraq war boosters. She's like, oh, he says, oh, yeah. Garrett, whatever his name is, says, the 19.1 million would have been impressive if she had done it the old-fashioned way. But she didn't. She did it this new way. Wallace, explain what that means. What is this new way? It's almost like there's never been a previous candidate who shunned big fat cat, behind closed doors, private, caviar rolling, champagne swigging fundraisers. Suddenly, the corporate media establishment is in awe of Senator Elizabeth Warren. And don't get me wrong, Warren deserves credit. She is, at least now in the primary, shunning private fundraisers. She hasn't held one. As far as we know, I'm going to check once the FEC deadline passes on July 15th. All the candidates by July 15th have to submit all their donor information to the Federal Election Commission. So we'll see if she's telling the truth, her and other candidates, if they're not taking Wall Street, fossil fuel money and all that. But as far as we know, she's not. She has said she's open for business in the general election, which is very problematic, if you ask me. But for now, she's not, and she deserves credit. She did raise $19 million. But, you know, it's just funny. Warren says, explain what that means. What does that mean, not doing private fundraisers? They are basically trying to create selective amnesia for their audience to make it seem like Elizabeth Warren is some trailblazer. She's doing something that has never been done. And it's not just the cable news folks. I mean, look at here you got former President Obama. He ran Obama's campaign, I believe, in 2012, Dan Pfeiffer. E. Warren swearing off fundraisers with a risky campaign gambit. But if she is elected president with that strategy, she will fundamentally change the relationship between moneyed interest and politicians forever. It's this complete alternate reality where Bernie Sanders wasn't the one who has already done this. And here you have Carly Stevenson, who works on the Sanders campaign, responding to that. Bernie raised over $200 million in 2015-16 without holding a single fundraiser. Shouldn't have to say this, but since Twitter is the most bad faith place on earth, it's great more candidates are swearing off big dollars. That's exactly what our system needs. But it's interesting some in the media choose to erase the candidate who's pioneered this fundraising model. Now, I played all those clips to you because you're getting a pattern that they're trying to present it like Bernie is baiting. Elizabeth Warren has the momentum. Bernie Sanders and his people close up shop, pitch the tents down, you know, nice try. We appreciate you moving the conversation left, meaning most of these candidates are just pretending to be for Medicare for all, free public college, those things. But of course, they'll moonwalk faster than Michael Jackson. They're wearing their flip-flops when they get into office. They're going to totally move away from a lot of positions they propose. So why this is important, all these clips? Because it's not true. Thank you, Ty, for making this graphic. Let's look at the actual numbers. And by the way, as far as I know, we're the first ones to report Bernie's individual donor number for the second quarter. For whatever reason, I don't know, maybe it was just an oversight, but I don't think the campaign had released it. I got it from them yesterday. So we have the totals. Buttigieg, 24.8 million, 21.5 for Biden, who again, like Buttigieg, those are mostly high-dollar fundraisers with Wall Street, a lot of special interests, law firms that represent Wall Street, so not exactly grassroots middle-class Joe. Warren, as I told you, 19.1 million, Bernie at 18 million, Harris at 12 million. Let's look at individual donors. Buttigieg, for that 24.8 million, 294,000 individual donors. Biden, 256,000 individual donors. Harris, 279,000 individual donors. So you're seeing a pattern? The people raising the most money from special interests, that would be Wall Street, law firms that represent financial institutions. I'm sure there's some lobbyists at these fundraisers. The financial elite of this country have less individual donors than Warren and Sanders. Then let's look at Warren. 384,000 individual donors. Not shabby. Not shabby compared to her first quarter, which was anemic. That's pretty impressive. I think she got in her first quarter less than 100,000 individual donors. First quarter meaning January, February, March. Bernie Sanders, again, I just got this yesterday. As far as I know, they haven't put it out there. 450,000 individual donors in the second quarter. I failed math in 11th grade. Is 450,000 larger than 384,000? Or 294,000? Or 256,000? Or 279,000? Yeah. So Bernie Sanders has outperformed every other candidate on the amount of individual people donating for the last 3 months. That would be April, May, and June. But corporate media didn't report that. Why didn't they report that? They could have got it from the campaign if they pushed. All I did was ask a few people in the campaign, and I got it. I don't know why they didn't release it in the first place. It's a good number. It's a little bit less than he did in the first quarter. In the first quarter, Bernie had 525,000 unique donors. In the second quarter, 450,000. So about 75,000 less, but it's still a heck of a lot of donors. 450,000 individual donors in the second quarter. Some of those might have swayed to Warren because she had a huge uptick. But in the Morning Joe clip that I told you, where Steve Ratner said, well, she's had something like 450,000 unique individual donors in this campaign. That's great. Bernie Sanders combined, you ready? 450? Bernie combined has had 975,000 unique donors. 525,000 unique donors in the first quarter, 450,000 in the second quarter. So by any objective measure, Bernie Sanders is smoking Senator Elizabeth Warren on individual donors for the first 3 months combined with the second 3 months. Then you look at actual donations. So you have people that donated individually and the total amount of donations. Buttigieg didn't release it. Couldn't find it anywhere. I wonder why. Biden, 436,000 total donations in the second quarter. Warren, 683,000 total donations in the second quarter. Bernie, 1 million total donations in the second quarter. Harris didn't release it. I wonder why. Okay, well, that means Bernie Sanders has had 2 million total donations for the entire campaign. And by the way, we're looking at a 6-month period. He began his campaign really at the end of February, early March. So he's gotten 2 million donations, basically March, April, May, June, in 4 months. As far as I could tell, correct me in the comments if you want, that's a record. Nobody has received 2 million total donations in 4 months of a presidential campaign. He's fading, he's fading, he's fading. And then you have average donation, Buttigieg 47, Biden 49, Harris 39, Warren 28, Sanders 18. So by any objective measure, the numbers, these are the numbers. You could check me if you want. I checked them and I checked them again. Bernie, yes, raised less money total, but he got more grassroots support from the most amount of individual donors at an average amount of $18. Why is this important? The corporate media will never report it this way because they don't want to provide the context, important context. One more time. When you look at this, it shows A, Bernie's not fading. He's got grassroots support at $18 is the average donation. You know what that means? He's got a consistent, ongoing, reliable base of supporters that can keep donating and donating and donating and donating. He's not going to run out of money. Whereas you see people like Buttigieg, Biden, Harris relying a lot on max donations, $2,800. Well, there's only so many Wall Street fat cats to go around. If they keep maxing out, then they can't donate again. Then they can't donate again. So you're going to be seeing those numbers go down as we go on in this campaign. Another measure that the corporate media is totally ignoring, Bernie Sanders, he's fading. Okay, well, New Morning Consult poll. Who's that in second place? Biden 31, Bernie 19, Harris 14, Elizabeth Warren 13. Oh, he's fading. Close down headquarters. Declare the campaign dead. ABC News. This from last week, all after the debate. Biden 29, Bernie 23, Harris 11, Warren 11. Sure, there's some polls where Warren's a little higher, Harris a little higher, but the average of all polls, Bernie is still polling number 2. But this myth and this narrative is he's fading, he can't raise the same amount of money as the others. Well, I just showed you in the second quarter, Bernie Sanders, he had the most individual donors. None of them have mentioned that. New York Times, Washington Post. I think they have more resources than I do to find out what was the individual donor number. So by all measures, individual donors, Bernie Sanders beat all of them. Number of donations, Bernie Sanders is smoking all of them. Average donation, Bernie Sanders beating them. The total, he got less. And again, I'm not knocking Warren. Average donation of $28 is good. Bernie's in 2016 was $27. She is doing, for now, grassroots fundraising, and she deserves credit. But this narrative that she has, A, reinvented the wheel, B, is she has the momentum. Bernie Sanders is fading. If we had a sane, ethical, fact-based corporate media, you look at this, yes, Bernie Sanders raised less on total, but he raised that amount from more individual people at a lower average donation, and he received more total donations. Any objective person would say Bernie Sanders is leading the way on fundraising, and we'll see